All right, so today we are getting into our biology unit, okay? So students just took a couple moments to write down what does biology mean to you. So Harriet, I'm going to ask you, what does biology mean to you?
It's like, no idea. I just said it like grass, you know.
Okay, so yeah, so grass is the first thing you see, right? It's everywhere, right? What does grass do for us?
Gives us a job to go on.
Perfect, okay? Gives us something to do in the summer, yeah, for sure. It's a good summer job, right? Yeah. But in terms of like the earth, what does grass do for us? What color is it right now?
Green. Well, it's not green right now.
It's kind of brown right now, right?
It looks like shit.
Hey, it's a little brown. Let's go with that, right? What happens to the grass in the summer?
Turns green.
Turns green. Excellent. And does anybody know why it turns green in the summer?
Because chlorophyll.
Yeah, absolutely, right? So right now, it's kind of cool outside, right? It was like -8 on the drive in, and it's springtime, right? So it's a little cooler. Typically, not the best growing conditions for plants and trees right now, right? So instead of investing a bunch of energy into like being green and having those chlorophyll molecules, which are responsible for photosynthesis, instead of like putting energy into having those, is the grass and trees and shrubs right now, they're actually dormant, right? They're not growing because they want to save their energy so they can survive the cooler months. And then when it gets to, warmer time in spring or summer, that's when it's going to start to turn green. It has energy to carry out photosynthesis, which then produces what? What's the main product of photosynthesis? What do we inhale?
Oxygen.
Oxygen, right? And then it produces oxygen, and then it grows and it reproduces, and we're happy because we can breathe, and the plant's happy because it gets to grow and live and stuff, right? Okay, so that's grass. Grass is also really important for like ecosystems because of the roots of grass will actually like hold the soil together better, right? So if you have like grassed in areas or just kind of areas that have plants, you will have less erosion, less dirt kind of washing away into streams and stuff, which is stuff what we don't like. Okay? Good. So we talked about grass. Tanner, what does biology mean to you?
Just plants and animals stuff.
So life?
Yeah.
Just life, right? Yeah, for sure, right? So biology in general, yeah, absolutely. It is the study of life and how organisms interact with their surroundings. Okay? Perfect. Dakota, what did you write down for yours?
I just feel like it's like living organisms and like how do you like the cell in the body?
Yeah, perfect. So how cells react to things, right? For sure. So biology is just kind of the study of interactions between organisms within an ecosystem, essentially, okay? So not like a really intense definition there. So biology is the science of life or living matter in all of its forms and phenomena, okay? And biology focuses on the origin, growth, reproduction, structure, and behavior of organisms, okay? Has anybody seen one of these images before?
No.
No? This is what we call a phylogenetic tree, and do not worry too much about that. Phylogenetic tree, okay? And what these phylogenetic trees are used for is to actually kind of illustrate the relationships amongst organisms, okay? So we will notice, so here is our mammal leg of the tree, right? So we have like horses and chimpanzees and humans up there, right? We are different than reptiles, right? We do not give birth with eggs or like external eggs, right? Females will have internal reproduction, right? Whereas reptiles will lay eggs and incubate them, right? So they're a little bit different. We have vertebrates here, and we have invertebrates kind of everywhere else, okay? Vertebrates meaning you actually have like vertebrae in your spinal column, okay? So we are vertebrates. From there, I mean, this, again, we could go on and talk about this forever. Could do a whole unit about that, to be honest. But again, this is just a phylogenetic tree, and this is going to just show the relationships amongst organisms. Okay? Great. And then, yeah, we have our like land plants on this side way over here.
How do sharks have babies?
How do sharks have babies? So sharks are actually, they're interesting. They're called oviviparous organisms, and what that means is that they actually give live birth, and I believe they give live birth, and I might have to double check on this, but they'll have like a internal, like, I don't know, a reproductive sac, kind of like humans do, and that's where their babies will develop, and then they will be birthed. And I'm pretty sure that they give live birth. Let me double check on that, okay? But yeah, I believe they're oviviparous organisms, and that just is based on how they reproduce and give birth. But I will check in on that for you. Good question, okay? Does anybody else have any other questions? Right off the hop? All right, cool. So now I want you guys to take 30 seconds here to write down what you think a cell is. So Maria, can I ask you, what is your thoughts on what a cell is?
I said cells are just what make up living things.
Okay, sure. Yeah, they make up living things. Perfect. They absolutely do. They make up living things. Now, is there only one type of cell that makes up living things? There's a variety of cells, right? Can anybody think of some types of cells that we have?
Blood cells?
Blood cells, perfect. What else? We got skin cells, blood cells, hair follicles, hair cells, right? Eyeballs, we call those photoreceptor cells, right? They take incoming light from the outside, and then it's processed in our brain, and it communicates to our brain what we're actually looking at. Okay, we have photoreceptor cells. Does anybody know what this cell is up on the screen? This is a brain cell. A neuron is what we call those, okay? But yeah, so we have lots of different types of cells, right? Those are just to name a few. Okay, so a cell is a basic unit of life, and cells will maintain life processes with organelles that each have a specific function. So can you guys please write these down? This is really important. What is a cell? Okay, a cell also exchanges matter and energy with its surroundings. So I love this image here because it kind of shows the relationship between atoms and molecules, stuff that we learned about in the first unit, right, in our chemistry unit, right? Atoms and molecules will come together to form a cell, okay? Cells, a collection of cells will make tissues, okay? So my photoreceptor cells in my eyes will, like the collection of those photoreceptor cells will be my eye tissue, right? A collection of like muscle cells will be muscle tissue, right? So cells make up tissues. Tissues, a collection of tissues will make up an organ, okay? Organs will make up organ systems, and then on the whole like the full scale image here, we have an organism, okay? So we have different levels of kind of, I don't know, sophistication, I guess, when we're looking at this. And this is interesting because we have lots of scientists that will, they're kind of like considered, or they're concerned with cell biology itself. I worked in a cell biology lab, and we were looking to observing the effects that different types of neonicotinoids, so like herbicides and pesticides, how those herbicides will affect the cells of like honeybees or leafcutter bees. Okay, so there's cell biology. Then you can have like tissue sciences, right? You'll have people who actually like specialize in like kidneys or livers or like brains. Okay, yeah. So here is kind of how things are organized from atoms all the way up to organisms. Okay. So just kind of combining those two terms. What is cell biology? So remember, biology was the study of life. Cell is the study, or cells are like the basic units of life, right? So cell biology, and don't worry too much about writing all of this down. But cell biology is the study of cell structure and function, and it revolves around the concept that the cell is the fundamental unit of life. Okay? The smallest organism on Earth may only have one cell. Okay, we call these unicellular. Okay, this is like an amoeba. I'll show you guys some videos about that. Or have many cells. We call those multicellular. What do you think we are? Unicellular or multicellular?
Multi.
Yeah, multi. Good. Okay. Cell biology focuses on the most general properties shared by all cells, to the unique, highly intricate functions particular to specialized cells, and we will learn about more about structure and function as we get into a little bit more in depth in our bio unit. Okay. Okay. So this is an image here of showing the 4 stages of cell division. Okay. Again, don't worry too much about what's like the concept in here. I just wanted to show you guys some images. If you're interested in mitosis, that you will learn that in depth in Bio 30, if that's your cup of tea. Okay. But it is what we have here. So this is a cell before it is going to like reproduce or divide into 2 more cells. Okay, and this is the cell getting ready for cell division, and over here is the cell after division. Okay, so here we don't see much in terms of color, but as we go from prophase to prometaphase, we start to see a higher density of this blue colored thing, right? Any idea what that blue colored thing might be? It is DNA. DNA, okay? So DNA is just kind of like hanging out in the cell. When it's about to divide, it comes together, okay? It comes together at like what we call an anaphase plate. Don't worry too much about that. But then once it's all lined up there, it's going to separate, and then your 1 copy of DNA will then turn into 2 copies of DNA, okay? That is basic cell division. That is how your like muscle cells will regenerate after you exercise, okay? So we have 1 blob of DNA, and then it will divide into 2 blobs of DNA. Okay? Why am I talking about DNA? What do we know about DNA? Yep.
Unique.
It's unique. Yep. It's unique between humans, right? So Abe is going to have different DNA than Mitch, who will have different DNA than Tanner, right? But we are also going to have different DNA than trees, right? Or grass or other animals. But we actually do still share a lot of DNA with some of these organisms. Okay? We are actually more closely related to fungus, so like mushrooms and stuff, than we are to trees. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Now that we're talking about things, does anybody know what the largest organism on Earth is?
Probably a whale.
No. You would think it's a whale, right? Whales are big. It is a good answer.
What is it? You're calling me an idiot. Exactly.
It is
You
not.
probably said dinosaur.
It is, gentlemen. It is not a tree either, but it is kind of close to a tree. It is a fungus. A fungus is the biggest organism on Earth. Yeah, but it's not. So when you guys see a mushroom, right? You're probably right. That's your mushroom, right? What we don't know or what we don't see is that there's actually a very extensive network of what we call hyphae. Okay, these are these are parts of the mushroom that just kind of like extend throughout the roots or throughout the soil. Okay, and the mushroom itself is only the reproductive structure of the fungus. Okay, so the majority of the fungus lives underground, and then when it sees or when it like is in an environment where it's like really wet or dark, and that is when it will shoot up a mushroom, and then that is where it is going to reproduce from. So a mushroom is actually like the reproductive structure of a fungus. Okay, but yeah, in terms of biomass, all of this hyphae, it actually makes that the largest organism on Earth in terms of biomass. So that's fun. Okay, so DNA. Well, that's good. We'll talk more about DNA in our next topic. Okay? Perfect. Okay. So actually I want to talk about DNA right now because we're going to get into some other stuff. So I want to tell you guys a story about life. Okay? Yep. I want to tell you guys a story about life, right? So we just talked about DNA, right? DNA. So as Abe mentioned, different species have different DNA, different members of the same species will have different DNA, okay? What does DNA do, though? What does DNA do for us? So DNA is going to, well, the actual structure of DNA, maybe you guys have seen this before, double helical structure is what we have, and we have a bunch of base pairs in there, okay? So we have base pairs, and it's kind of like coiled up. This is stored, DNA is stored in the nucleus, okay? That's important. We'll talk more about that in our next section. But DNA is stored in the nucleus, okay? Stored in nucleus. Okay, and what does DNA do? Well, there's a little thing, it's called DNA polymerase. Okay, it's a protein. Proteins are really important for biology, okay? Proteins pretty much do like all of the work in your body, okay? So we'll get like a little protein, it's called DNA polymerase. It is going to jump onto the DNA and it's going to kind of like break it in half, okay? It's going to break it in half, and then another protein is going to jump on that half strand, which is RNA. So DNA makes RNA, and RNA is only one-stranded, okay? So note, DNA is double-stranded, okay? RNA has only one strand, so it's like half a ladder, essentially, okay? Now, what's going to happen here is that we're going to get another little protein. This is going to be an RNA polymerase. And again, don't worry about those names. I just want to tell you guys a story here. Okay? So then you're going to get another protein that jumps onto that RNA molecule. And it's going to read these little, is what we call codons. Okay? They're like little codes, essentially, in the RNA. Okay? When that protein, when this polymerase reads these codes, it is going to encode for what we call an amino acid. Okay? Has anybody heard of an amino acid before? Some of us not. That's okay. Okay? So that is going to code for an amino acid. Okay? There are like 20 amino acids that are used to make up organisms on Earth. There may be 21. Okay, but there's a finite amount. It's around 20. Okay? And then amino acids. So this is going to kind of go down there, and then it's going to essentially call up an amino acid. It's like, all right, listen up, buddy. It's your time. We need you. Okay? So this RNA is going to keep reading it, and then it's going to code for another amino acid, and then it's going to code for another amino acid, and then it's going to code for another amino acid, and then is what that is going to form is a protein. Remember when I said proteins are like the most important parts of our bodies? Okay, I was not lying. Okay, so proteins are important. These are like the workers of the cell. Workers of the cell. Does anybody know of a protein? Just off the top of their head? Sorry.
You mean like a source of protein?
No, just like a protein. So, but yeah, okay, so what were you thinking, like a source of protein?
Red meat.
Red meat, okay? Because red meat is a good source of protein because it is made up of protein, right? So protein is made up of amino acids. So when we like eat protein, our body digests it into amino acids, which we then use to like rebuild and regenerate our own body. Okay? But yeah, a protein would be like keratin. Okay, keratin is the substance that makes up your fingernails. Okay, keratin would be a protein. Another protein that we would have, it's like a protein enzyme, like insulin. Okay, have you guys heard of insulin before? Yeah, okay. Keratin or insulin. If you see something that like ends in an in or an ine, it's a good indicator that it's a protein. Okay? Okay. Do you guys have any questions? Like anything related to bio? This is like a good intro day to ask those types of questions. No? Just get on with it. Alrighty then. I will. I will. Okay. So DNA makes RNA, makes amino acids, which makes proteins, which will then like make up an organism. Okay? So this is kind of roughly how life will kind of be generated. Okay, so in science, they have like a few different tenets of the nature of science. Okay, so the nature of science has been developed, well, I don't know, since like 400 BCE, so over like 2,500 years ago, right? So it's been a long time. Back then, we did not have the technology that we have now, obviously, right? So when, you know, ancient scientists were trying to organize things, it was like really rough and crude going like at the very beginning, right? So Aristotle developed he was the first person to like develop a classification system trying to organize just the relationships among organisms in the world, and he grouped them based on their similarities. Okay, so if they lived in water, if they lived on land, if they had blood or not. Okay, so like trees do not have blood, right? Insects, do insects have blood?
Yes.
Okay, so technically they do not have blood because blood is like considered to be in an enclosed circulatory system, right? So like we have veins and arteries and stuff, right? So like our blood is enclosed. Insects do not have blood, but is what they call it is hemolymph. I'll write that down. Don't worry about it. But hemolymph. Okay, and it is just like it's not blood, but it's just fluid that surrounds like the entire body. So they don't have a circulatory system, but they just have like fluid that surrounds their organs. Okay, so they don't. Insects do not technically have blood, they have hemolymph. Okay, not like we have blood because it's in an enclosed circulatory system. Okay? And lastly, he believed that there was a hierarchy of life with humans at the top, of course, right? Of course. So Aristotle's hierarchy of life kind of looks like this on the left here, okay? So we have man and mammals at the top, right? And then, some of the other animals that we just kind of like rely on, right? Fish, chickens, and then as we move down, we have like cephalopods, like octopus, snails. We have some, looks like a shark here, right? So, and then at the bottom it just has like your fungi and jellyfish and plants, right? This is, I don't know. That's just how it's kind of viewed as a hierarchy of life. This is Aristotle's hierarchy. Okay? On the right here, this is kind of how in typical like indigenous cultures would view the relationships throughout Earth. Not that it's a hierarchy, but it's more of like a circle, right? Things are connected, and there's not one organism that's necessarily at the top. Right? Like for example, if we just look at our Western ideology hierarchy here, we have plants and fungi at the bottom here, right? But what do we rely on? What do we need to breathe? What do we need to survive?
Oxygen.
Oxygen, right? And if there's no plants around, would we be able to breathe? No, right? So we really rely on the plants here. And same with the fungus. Does anybody know what like fungi's job is to do?
Break down waste.
Absolutely, right? We call that detritus. So yeah, like fungus, fungi's, those are the like recyclers of the earth, right? They're going to break down that organic molecule into smaller and smaller pieces so that like plants, like trees and shrubs and stuff, can absorb those nutrients and grow and make oxygen for us. Okay? So, just off of the Western ideology, if we don't have trees and we don't have fungi, just taking two of those really important things out of there, right? Our material is not going to be recycled and we're not going to have air, right? So, indigenous cultures, they're more of like a holistic kind of based ideology of the earth, and they kind of realize that we all kind of live in harmony with one another, and it's important that we don't kind of remove one component of that. I don't know, if we move one component of that relationship, then somewhere along the line we're going to have kind of like one part of the ecosystem could fault if we have one component that's missing, right? Like if we didn't have trees, there would not be air to breathe and organisms would die, right? So humans and organisms rely on one another to survive here. So it's not necessarily a hierarchy that we see in nature, but it's more of like a holistic relationship that we have with all organisms. Okay, and we're starting to notice now, if we like eliminate some organisms from the equation, like we have been treating our oceans like crap for, I don't know, 40 years or so, right? Has anybody watched the Seaspiracy on Netflix there? I have not watched it, but it's on there. Apparently it's pretty good. Personally, I think they should have named it Conspiracy instead of Seaspiracy. It just makes more sense, right? Conspiracy, S-E-I-T-N. Huh? Ah.
Good idea.
Right? Yeah. But yeah, like the oceans have just been like overfished, polluted, and we're going to hopefully not, but we're going to like see the effects of that in the next couple decades, because the aquatic life, the numbers of aquatic life living in the ocean are significantly down in comparison to the last 30 or 40 years. Okay, so what am I trying to say here? What's the big takeaway message here? Our relationship with other organisms on this earth, it's pretty important, right? I mean, you guys go to the zoo, you guys have seen giraffes and like polar bears and stuff like that, right? It's pretty cool. I really enjoy sharing the earth with those organisms. It would be quite disappointing if like polar bears were to go extinct, right? So we need to take care of all organisms, not just the ones that seem most important for our daily lives, right? Okay. So within biology itself, there are going to be a few themes that kind of unify all of biology, okay? And don't worry too much about writing these down, okay? Yeah, so some themes that unify biology. So number one, cells are the simplest unit of life. Okay, cells are the simplest unit of life. Structure of a system is related to its function. So the structure of leaves outside, I know we don't really have any on the trees right now, but they're thin, they're kind of big, right? They're thin and they're big. One, they want to maximize the absorption of solar rays, right? So they can grow bigger. But it also needs to be thin, because if it's too heavy, the leaves, then the branches will break, right? So there's structure and function relationship within a leaf, okay? Organisms exchange matter and energy with their surroundings. Okay, that's a big one. We will touch base on that one quite often. Feedback mechanisms will relate biological processes. So this is a kind of like a flow chart after what happens when you eat food. Okay, so starting right here, if you eat a meal, your blood glucose level will increase, right? You're kind of getting sugar into your body. Your pancreas recognizes that you have a high blood sugar, so it will release insulin into your bloodstream, which is a hormone, a protein hormone. That tells our cells in our body to take up the glucose which is in our bloodstream, and that's going to store them as glycogen in our cells around our body. Okay? So that's what happens after we eat. Now, if it has been, a few hours since we've eaten last, our blood sugar is going to decrease, right? Our body does not like a decrease in blood sugar. It kind of likes to keep it, what we say is homeostasis, at one level, right? It doesn't like big rises and falls of blood sugar. It tries to keep it moderately level, okay? So if it's been a few hours since you've eaten, your blood glucose level will decrease, okay? That is when your pancreas will secrete a different protein. This is called glucagon, okay? That glycogen, which was originally stored in your liver, will be broken down into glucose. That glucose will be released into your bloodstream, and then your blood sugar level will increase, okay? Trying to keep it around that 90 milligrams per 100 milliliters of blood, okay? So there are a lot of feedback mechanisms that will regulate biological processes. Another example would be like if you get a cut, like an open wound, right? Maybe you get a scratch from a tree or something like that, and you're bleeding. Your body is going to recognize that there is a cut, and it will send more blood platelets. Okay, platelets are like the parts that will block your cut and stop your bleeding. Okay, so if you have a cut and you're bleeding, your body is going to send more and more and more and more blood platelets until your cut is sealed and it's not bleeding anymore. Okay, so that is a positive feedback loop. It sends more and more and more of the platelets until you're done bleeding. Okay, and lastly, heritable information is encoded in DNA. Okay, so you're going to get some traits from your mom and your dad, right? Because they each gave their DNA and then made you, and then you have a set of both chromosomes, right? So you get traits from both your mom and your dad. Okay, so we talked about what is a cell already. So remember, this is a basic unit of life. It maintains life processes with organelles. Okay, we will learn about those next week. And it exchanges matter and energy with its surroundings. Does anybody remember what type of system from our physics unit this would make a cell? If it exchanges matter and energy. If it exchanges matter and energy, this is an open system. Matter and energy. It is an open system. Okay? Okay, what is a cell? So it carries out all of the life processes. So you guys need to write these down, please. So these are the life processes right here. So intake of nutrients. Movement, right? So intake of nutrients, that's like eating, right? Movement, it needs to be able to locomote. It needs to grow. That's in the case of a tree. Bigger is better, right? The bigger the tree gets, the more sun it gets. There's a positive feedback loop. The more sun it gets, the bigger it gets, and the bigger it gets, the more sun it gets. It's actually called the Matthew principle. And this is really common about across the nature. But it does not only extend to the environmental side of things. That can also be applied to economics. Okay? The rich get rich richer, right? The more money you have, the more money you can make, right? It's the Matthew principle. It's just a phenomena of life. A lot of people get mad at billionaires because they have so much money, and which is fair. But it's just like a phenomena of nature. Things with more things get more things. Okay, so like trees. As trees get, okay, so let's talk about trees in a rainforest, okay? What happens to a tree if it is not tall enough to get the sun from the canopy? Sorry, has anybody been in a rainforest? Ryan, you've been to a rainforest. So what happens if you're walking in the rainforest on a nice hot day? Does much sun get through? No, right? Because the canopy, all the trees, are blocking that or absorbing the sunlight, right? So if you're a little tree and you're underneath the canopy and you're not getting any sunlight, are you going to grow much? No, right? So trees, plants want to get as big as they can so they can get as much sunlight as possible so they can be bigger, right? So a tree that can grow really quickly will get lots of sunlight. If it gets lots of sunlight, it will get bigger. And if it gets bigger, it will get more sunlight. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's just a positive feedback loop. The bigger the tree is, the more sunlight it gets, so the bigger the tree becomes. This is like, this is the same for like stars, right? Stars have a really big mass, right? Mass attracts things in space. The more mass you have, the more things you're going to attract. And the more things you attract, the more mass you have, right? So this is just a concept of nature. Billionaires, they have a lot of money, so they can make more money because they have a lot of money. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you see the connections between biology and economics? Yeah, it's called the Matthew Principle. And so all I'm trying to say is don't be too mad at billionaires for being really rich because it's not their fault. Well, they're just smart and they're good with their money. I saw something really interesting on the internet. It was talking about how much money you could take from billionaires without reducing the amount of money, or reducing the amount of billionaires on the planet. So, like, for example, if somebody had like $38 billion, they would take $37 billion from them and then put it in the account for like whatever. And apparently you could take like $300 trillion from all of the billionaires without reducing the amount of billionaires on Earth. Does that make sense? So everybody still has $1 billion, but like the whole world would get like $3 trillion or something like that. The information on there, it was saying that that was enough food or enough money to end world health for like 80 years, which is crazy. Yeah. So anyways, sorry for the science tangent, but I always, that Matthew Principle is so cool because I just love how it like transfers between economics and biology as well. Okay, so a cell needs to be able to respond to stimuli, right? So if it's like a little amoeba, say, and something wants to eat that amoeba, it needs to get away from that predator, right? That being said, if it notices there's like some food nearby, if there's some food nearby, it needs to respond to that food, and it's going to crawl over to that food and eat it. Okay? Gas exchange. Okay? It needs to be able to respirate. Okay? So humans, we largely have aerobic respiration, so we inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. Sometimes in our muscles, if we exercise a lot, if you're like playing hockey and you haven't been on a change for a while, right? If you feel like a lot of burning in your muscles, that's because you've used up a lot of the oxygen. That like you're using up the oxygen faster than you can breathe it in, right? So then you're starting to go in anaerobic respiration. So that's where oxygen is not present, and that's when you're going to get like the accumulation of lactic acid. So if you ever like work out for a while and your muscles just kind of like burn for a day or two after, that is lactic acid in your muscles. Okay, and that is a result of anaerobic respiration. Waste removal, of course, we need to get rid of waste or else it will, toxify the organism, right? So that's really important. And lastly, but most importantly, reproduction. Okay? I'm going to leave it there for today.